Welcome to the Deep Dive, your truly custom, hyper-focused shortcut to knowledge. I'm your host, and our mission is always the same. We take the stack of sources you provided and boil it down into the most essential, mind-expanding nuggets you need right now, all while keeping the vibe chill and the insight flowing.
Today, we are not just analyzing abstract philosophical concepts or simple self-help frameworks. We are talking about the fundamental architectural blueprint of your day-to-day reality. We are examining what Seth calls the psychic building blocks of your life. It's dense, but we promise to make it relatable and even, dare I say, fun.
That is the promise. We are diving deep into a topic that is foundational to how we construct, or sometimes sabotage, our daily existence.
Our source material for this monumental deep dive comes from the legendary Seth material, specifically Session 76 of the Early Sessions Book 2. This session was recorded quite precisely on Monday, August 3, 1964 at 9 p.m.
Before we jump into the mind-bending analysis, a quick but important declaration. This deep dive is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We extend our sincere credit to the Seth material and the publisher, New Awareness Network, for their tireless work in preserving and making this incredible body of work available to the public.
To set the context, which is absolutely crucial here, this session opens with the note-taker, Joseph, recording a recent very physical setback. He and Jane Rubert had just been denied a GI loan for a house purchase, the Birch House, which they had been counting on. This seemed to contradict prior guidance, and the frustration was immediate. This cancellation, seemingly arbitrary, created the perfect launchpad for Seth to delve into a deep clinical analysis of a single crucial concept, expectation.
So here's our central mission today. We need to fully unpack and grasp the profound power difference between simple desire, a wish list, and a true functioning expectation. Seth argues that expectation is not a hopeful thought. It is the fundamental framework, the operational command center, the actual psychic blueprint that dictates what physical reality you receive, how you filter that reality, and ultimately how you interpret what you see.
Let's start at the atomic level, or rather the pre-atomic level. Seth defines expectation as being rooted in the innermost aspects of personality, functioning as the fundamental framework for physical construction. This is where the term psychic building blocks becomes literal, not metaphorical.
It's a mind shift, isn't it? Because in our conventional Newtonian worldview, physical reality is built upon atoms and molecules. Seth seems to be saying there is a prior layer, a scaffolding built from consciousness itself.
Exactly. The implication is revolutionary. He suggests expectation is more fundamental than atoms and molecules when it comes to materializing form. It's the pre-physical framework upon which physical shapes, whether they are a table, a house, a circumstance, or a relationship, are ultimately erected.
I want to dwell on that implication for a moment.
Yeah.
If expectation is the scaffolding, what is the raw material it is built from? Seth is clear that it comes from our emotions.
Yes. And this is the part that adds true depth. Seth specifies that emotions are not just abstract feelings. In their own sphere, unperceived by our outer physical senses, emotions possess their own solidity, shape.
That challenges the conventional psychological definition. We usually see emotions as fleeting states or chemical reactions, but Seth suggests they have a density and structure in another dimension that we ignore. So joy isn't just a rush of dopamine. It's a specific, solidified psychic block with a palpable form in its own realm.
Correct. And it is from these emotions, these raw blocks of energy, that our expectations are formed. The expectation is the architectural design. The emotion is the material used to realize that design in the non-physical realm before it triggers physical manifestation.
This gives us the crucial lever, the difference between desire and expectation. Everyone has desire. I desire to be a great writer. I desire a financially comfortable life. But desire alone, Seth warns, is insufficient.
It is the essential differentiator. Desire is essentially a conscious preference or a longing. It looks outward at the desired object. Expectation, however, is an inner operational command directed at the self and the construction of reality. Seth puts it simply, if a man wants to change his fate, desire is not enough, but expectation is. Desire may grow into expectation, but alone it is not enough.
So desire is the fuel, but expectation is the ignition key, the main trigger.
Precisely. Expectation is labeled the main trigger that switches inner data into the realm of physical construction. Think of desire as a blueprint sitting on a desk. It's a nice idea, but nothing happens. Expectation is the moment you pick up that blueprint and start ordering the materials and hiring the construction crew. Without that active expectation trigger, Seth warns, no physical construction results. The desired castle remains inert paper.
I see where this challenges traditional therapy and goal-setting models, which often focus heavily on positive thinking, desire, and external action. Seth seems to be saying, forget the external action for a moment. Fix the fundamental internal framework first.
Yes. You can perform all the positive actions you want, but if your deep subconscious expectation remains rooted in failure or poverty, the desire is constantly being overruled by the operational command.
Which flows perfectly into how we deploy these emotional building blocks, consciously or unconsciously. The quality of our expectation is determined by how we handle that emotional flow.
Seth is very specific here, clarifying the causal direction. The emotions indeed do form the expectations, and it is not the other way around. If you allow a pervasive feeling of anxiety to persist, that anxiety naturally solidifies into an expectation of future threat or danger. If you maintain a consistent emotional tone of gratitude and joy, that tone solidifies into an expectation of positive outcomes and abundance.
And this highlights the consequence of ignoring the architecture. You mentioned an analogy about ignoring this relationship, throwing the blocks to the wind and hoping they fall into a castle.
That is the unfortunate fate of those who do not learn psychic mobility. If you fail to consciously manipulate and direct the emotions that form the expectation framework, you are leaving your psychic construction up to random chance, or, more commonly, up to habitual negative emotional patterning formed in early life. You are metaphorically throwing valuable building material away.
This means the initial step isn't just be happy, but rather acknowledge and direct the emotional energy you already possess, because that energy is always, inevitably, forming the scaffolding of your next moment.
Now we move to the practical mechanics. Expectation is not a singular function. It acts as a triadic system that dictates our daily perceived reality. We've established the first rule: construction, acting as the trigger for physical manifestation.
But the other two roles are what lock us into our specific version of reality. Let's talk about the filter. Seth uses the very specific term, sifting. Why is that particular word so important?
The term sifting implies a deliberate selection process, like a miner sifting for gold. Rule number 2 is sifting. Expectation determines what inner data, out of the infinite chaotic amount of available information, will be received and perceived by the individual. Your expectation framework essentially builds a highly selective antenna.
So in a massive stream of potential reality data, the expectation acts as the pre-selection mechanism, narrowing down the field of possibilities before it even reaches conscious awareness.
Precisely. If you are operating under an expectation of scarcity, your inner antenna simply filters out the subtle data cues indicating opportunity, potential connections, or market shifts. That data is still there, but it doesn't cross the threshold into your perceived reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the second part of the receiving process is interpretation. Once the data is sifted and received, once you've tuned into that one frequency, the individual then interprets that filtered data in terms of the same expectations.
It creates a closed loop, an airtight system of self-reinforcement. The expectation dictates what specific data you see, sifting, and then the expectation dictates what meaning you assign to that limited data, interpretation. This is the profound mechanism that explains the fundamental division in human experience.
Let's use a concrete example to illustrate this loop, the rainy Monday scenario. Imagine two people facing a torrential downpour on a day when they both have a critical deadline.
Person A operates under an expectation of failure and struggle. The sifting function immediately focuses on all the data related to the rain, the slow traffic, the fear of their computer shorting out, the gloomy mood in the office. The interpretation function then takes this data and confirms the expectation. This rain is proof that the universe is against me, and I will inevitably miss this deadline.
Now, person B operates under an expectation of success and resourcefulness. The sifting function focuses on entirely different data points. The rain means fewer distractions from coworkers, a legitimate excuse to work quietly from home, or even the feeling of coziness and concentration. The interpretation function then confirms their expectation. This rain is actually a gift of focused time, ensuring the success of this project.
It's the same physical reality data, the rain, but entirely different perceived realities result. The expectations are not merely coloring the lens, they are determining which facts are even allowed onto the canvas.
That is the definition of creating physical truths. It leads directly to the core statement that, in our physical realm, truths are often caused by, or are the result of, expectations work out. It suggests that many of our collective immutable facts are simply highly reinforced, crystallized expectations.
And the classic example Seth provides is the pervasive cultural expectation, the poverty artistic ability example, the belief that excellent artists must be poverty-stricken.
This expectation becomes a psychological, physical, and financial law for the individual who holds it deeply. For the person, the archetypal starving artist, this framework means poverty is a necessary protective shell for talent.
And here's the subtle tragedy. If that artist were to suddenly gain wealth, they would immediately perceive their core identity, their artistic ability, as being under threat. Because in your realm of expectation, ability of this nature and wealth do not exist simultaneously.
To protect the expectation that defines their self-worth, the expectation of being a true artist, they would actively and rigorously fight to retain their poverty. This isn't laziness. It's a profound unconscious act of self-preservation. They sabotage sales, turn down lucrative commercial projects, or create art that is intentionally inaccessible, all to reinforce the poverty framework that they believe guarantees their talent.
But if we contrast this with another artist who does not hold this specific expectation, for that person, wealth provides freedom, time, resources, and better materials. Wealth poses no threat to their ability. In fact, Seth explicitly suggests it may even improve the ability. The physical truth observed, whether the artist must be poor, is entirely contingent on the expectation framework doing the sifting and interpretation.
So what's the origin point of this powerful framework? We know emotions form it, but what keeps it running?
Expectation utilizes strong abilities and comprehensions on a subconscious level, driven by the motivating force of the personality. It's the personality's core belief system in action. Now, an important clarification Seth makes is regarding past existences.
Ah, yes. The critique noted that we breezed past this in the earlier version. How does Seth frame the influence of past lives on our current expectations?
Seth confirms that past existences do influence current expectation, often laying down deep, habitual emotional patterns regarding safety, worth, or power. However, he is absolutely clear that this influence is not enough to be binding upon the present personality.
Why isn't it binding? What gives the present personality the prerogative to change the channel?
The current personality possesses free will and the ability to apply intellect and consciousness to the current emotional landscape. The past self is a foundation, but not a prison. The moment the current personality applies conscious direction to its emotional energy, as we discussed in Section 1, it begins to re-engineer the psychic building blocks, overriding the historical pattern. The past influences the starting point, but the present consciousness holds the remote control.
That is a crucial detail. It means the summary remains practically valid, despite the complexity. An expectation of danger will indeed create danger. An expectation of success will create success. But it's not simply a matter of positive thinking. It's a mastery of emotional architecture.
Exactly. It requires serious inner work, which Seth says the intellect should provide, to see inward and understand where the power is being routed.
Since expectation is fundamentally formed by directed emotion, the starting point for changing our reality framework is manipulating those basic emotions themselves. This is where we learn psychic mobility.
If we are not masters of this mobility, we are throwing our emotional building blocks aimlessly. This brings us to the thorny issue of negative, unavoidable emotions like hatred, fear, and aggression. We often feel we must suppress these.
But Seth addresses this head-on, reframing aggression. It's described not as inherently bad or evil, but merely the result of energy not clearly directed or invalid survival patterns. The energy itself is neutral. The direction is the problem.
It's a remarkable statement about the fungibility of psychic energy. Emotional energy is highly transformable. The aggressive, potent energy residing in hate, for example, can be utilized in love. It's an energy transfer, not a moral judgment or an exorcism. The quantum of energy remains the same. Only the direction and resulting manifestation change.
And the key actionable instruction here is all about speed and timing. Aggressions must be turned into constructive terms as soon as possible after recognition.
This is crucial for avoiding self-sabotage. What happens if you fail to do this, if you let the feeling, the raw energy block fester?
The energy stores up, it doesn't dissipate, it waits, coiled, until it explodes in what we will call an unsupervised construction.
An unsupervised construction is a detrimental physical event manifested solely because undirected emotional energy reached a critical mass and had to construct something. Think of inexplicable car trouble right before a crucial meeting, a sudden explosive argument over a minor issue, or an unexpected financial hit. These are the result of energy that wasn't channeled deliberately.
This is precisely why the GI loan denial anecdote that opened the session is so illustrative. Seth actually praised Rubert's, or Jane's, almost instant reaction following the denial notice. She instinctively applied psychic mobility.
Yes, it's the humorous interlude, but it's packed with insight. Seth warns that if they had let that unharnessed aggressive feeling fester, it would have caused difficulties at the gallery and even in your personal relationship. Instead, Rupert immediately channeled that disappointed aggression constructively.
She used two specific, simple methods. Number one, his seeking out of his friend, your landlady, was beneficial, since in harmless talk and chatter, much aggressive energy was harmlessly constructed. It wasn't deep therapy. It was simple, human interaction used to diffuse the raw energy.
And the second method was even better, demonstrating the power of kinetic redirection. The almost immediate bustling about in the apartment was even better. She immediately started physically changing things, moving furniture, cleaning, constructively changing the physical environment around her.
I appreciate that Seth uses humor to underscore the importance of this redirection, even accepting less than ideal methods. He notes that even a temper tantrum, such as dish throwing, would have been more effective than no action, though not the best sort of solution.
The takeaway is clear. The most important thing is action. Physical activity, the rearranging, the bustling about is an excellent, instinctively correct way of controlling and using that aggressive reaction to prevent the buildup that leads to those detrimental, unsupervised constructions. It prevents the habitual piling up of aggressions that inevitably result in negative manifestations. The energy of disappointment was released and rerouted into a positive project, rearranging their living space, preventing it from manifesting as a negative consequence elsewhere.
So if you feel that surge of frustration, that anger, recognize it as raw power and deploy it immediately, even if it's just rearranging your sock drawer or scrubbing the floor until it shines.
That is psychic mobility in action. It's about taking those emotional building blocks and directing them, rather than letting them pile up until they trigger a collapse.
We've established the theory. Now let's apply Seth's X-ray vision to the personal lives of Joseph and Rupert, because they provide a perfect, detailed case study of how deep-seated, illogical expectations create massive, visible, physical construction blocks.
It's crucial to remember Seth's warning. While desire is easy to identify, it is extremely important, if difficult, to probe and to discover exactly what your present expectations are. We only construct the environment we believe capable of construction, meaning we unconsciously filter out opportunities that clash with our deep expectations.
And often we think our abilities are lagging. But Seth flips the script. Expectation forms abilities. If expectations were higher, so would abilities flourish. If you only expect 10% from yourself, your psychic framework only builds an environment capable of supporting 10% ability.
Let's apply this clinical analysis to Joseph, the note-taker and artist. Seth pinpoints 4 specific layered blocks that were actively preventing him from achieving financial success. The first and most familiar is the artist poverty fear.
This is the realization that hit Joseph subconsciously when he recognized himself as a serious artist. Seth states the core belief. I would suggest, Joseph, that you received the early idea that a true artist could not be wealthy. You knew subconsciously that you were an artist. The moment that you consciously realized you were an artist, you ceased the attempt to make good money, fearing it would rob you of your ability.
It's the ultimate self-sabotage, constructing financial limitations as a guardrail for creative integrity. He made the leap of logic that while some energy must go into art, therefore all money-making activities must deplete the art pool, leading to the conclusion, an artist must be poor.
But the psychological anchors went deeper, extending into family dynamics. Block number 2, guilt and the father. Seth suggested a rather illogical but perhaps understandable feeling of guilt involving your father. Joseph hesitated to be more financially solvent than his father, who struggled throughout his life.
This is an unconscious financial loyalty pact. The expectation is, I must not exceed my father, because to do so would symbolically shame him or invalidate his struggles. This expectation dictates the construction of reality, ensuring Joseph's income remains below that psychological ceiling.
And here is where Seth uses that brilliant moment of conversational humor, addressing the third block, the incestuous fear. The premise is that Joseph feared making more money than his father because he was afraid his father would perceive the success as Joseph trying to take his mother away.
Because the mother, who prized financial success, would be delighted by Joseph's wealth. It's a hilarious leap of subconscious logic. And Seth, ever the personality, delivers this classic line, making sure Jane, the channel, is enjoying the moment. Now, what you would want to do with a 72-year-old woman is beyond me. Forgive my humor, since the subject is serious. I couldn't resist.
That is Seth at his best, using humor to diffuse the immense tension surrounding deep-seated psychological baggage influencing something as mundane as commercial art. But the underlying issue is deadly serious, leading to the fourth, most self-sabotaging block: the subconscious need to punish the mother.
The mother, who was pushing the father to make money, created pressure. Therefore, the inner expectation reasoning solidifies into a defense mechanism. No one, including yourself, will ever be allowed to do the same to you. I will not succeed because I refuse to subject myself to the financial pressure that tormented my father.
The convergence of these four distortive expectations acts like a four-point psychological anchor, severely limiting their reality. Seth warns that this complex, distortive expectation of yours could end up making you bitter even against your painting, eventually preventing Joseph from seeking financial reward and even showing his work in galleries. The ultimate unsupervised construction would be the destruction of the very thing he was trying to protect: his art.
And the complexity doesn't end there, because these individual blocks were mutually reinforced. Let's look at Rupert, the channel and writer.
Rupert also had deep-seated blocks. One powerful belief was that a writer of real merit cannot bear children. This expectation was so intrinsically linked to the core of Rupert's identity, the expectation of creative self-worth, that Seth issued a rare warning against directly tampering with it, noting that Rupert's personality framework was so bound to this non-existent truth that it would be dangerous.
That underscores the gravity of established expectations. If a block is too foundational, attempting to simply rip it out could cause the whole structure to collapse. Rupert also had deep financial fears, an infantile interpretation of his grandfather's life, and a powerful internalized fear that his mother would steal him blind, reinforcing the belief that wealth leads to loss and exploitation.
And here's the alliance, the co-creation of reality. Seth points out that the couple reinforced each other's poverty expectations beautifully. They had built a joint expectation framework of creative hardship.
The physical manifestations were undeniable. Rupert would write a story that was otherwise excellent but saleable, and put in one or two lines and a tinge throughout the tale to make it unsaleable. It was self-sabotage engineered into the product itself. They were both literally bending over backward not to make money.
The conclusion, therefore, is not a simple suggestion like, go get a steady job. The key actionable step is to apply the intellect inward. Examine as objectively as possible your own basic expectations, because changing the expectation is the fundamental foundational step to changing the physical result.
Seth suggests a workable middle ground for prosperity that doesn't conflict with the creative drive. Commercial work that still expresses an intuitive and creative part of the personality, not hack work. It allows the creative energy to be channeled constructively toward financial reward without triggering the deep-seated fears of selling out.
He noted that Joseph's skills in commercial art were more readily adaptable to this than Rupert's writing at that specific moment, as Joseph was more sure of how you get your effects. It's about finding the path where ability brings its natural physical construction, rather than unconsciously fighting against it.
We can now circle back, full circle, to the event that kicked off this entire profound discussion: the unexpected denial of the GI loan for the Birch House.
Seth addresses this, confirming that both Rupert and Joseph sensed the shift in the mood of the people surrounding it during their third visit to the house. The collective expectation around the deal had already begun to crumble.
Crucially, Seth talks about the conditional nature of psychic forecasts. He admits trying to influence them positively, believing that if they had taken the house, it would have worked out well because their positive expectations would have then built it up.
But the reality trigger was never pulled. Construction only results from practical acceptance, signature on the dotted line acceptance. Desire and even positive psychic influence weren't enough. The practical, concrete expectation of handling that financial commitment had to be fully present to trigger the construction of that reality.
And it wasn't. The house represented the height of their expectations at that time, the very thing that triggered all those underlying fears of money, commitment, and outdoing the father. When faced by the house in concrete terms, they changed your expectations. The desire was there, but the expectation framework was not.
The denial, therefore, was not a punishment from the universe. It served as a perfect, objective mirror, showing them exactly what their true operating expectations were. That deep down, due to the blocks we analyzed, they were bending over backward not to make or handle that kind of stability and obligation.
But the story has a silver lining. The energy released in dealing with that disappointment, The aggression, the disappointment, and then the constructive channeling of it through bustling in the apartment could now be utilized immediately in their work and future positive constructions. It was a net gain of directed energy, a lesson in psychic mobility.
The final summation on financial expectation is essential for the listener. It's not about coldly going after money, which would trigger all those deep-seated fears. It is rather a case of naturally expecting that ability will bring its natural physical constructions in terms of physical satisfaction. This reframes prosperity from a struggle against fate to a natural, inevitable consequence of an aligned expectation framework.
This has been an incredibly complex and detailed deep dive into the very fabric of subjective reality. Let's synthesize the most essential, actionable takeaways from session 76.
First and foremost, expectation is the master filter and trigger. It's the psychic building block, far surpassing simple desire in its actual power to manifest physical construction. Desire wishes, expectation commands.
Second, your truth. The things you believe are unchangeable facts about life, money, or talent are often nothing more than your shared or individual expectation framework worked out in the physical field, creating self-constructed prisons like the poverty-stricken artist analogy.
Third, emotional energy, even aggression, is pure power. It is not to be bottled up. It must be recognized, transformed, and channeled constructively, often through simple, immediate physical activity to prevent those dangerous, unsupervised constructions from erupting in your life.
And finally, you must probe your subconscious. Use your intellectual X-ray to discover your current expectations, especially those concerning money, creative worth, and personal stability, to avoid those insidious, self-sabotaging constructions that deny you the things you consciously desire.
This material truly transforms the understanding of personal power and reality creation.
If this discussion has intrigued you, we encourage you to dive deeper and study the source material yourself. You can find the full context in the Seth material books. We also encourage you to visit the New Awareness Network website and bookstore at sethcenter.com/deido, the early sessions, to explore these concepts further.
And here's a final provocative thought for you to carry forward today, building on the idea of expectation as the sifter and interpreter. If expectation determines precisely which inner data is allowed to be received and interpreted to form our reality, then consider, how many alternate amazing realities built upon different yet equally valid expectations are we ignoring right now simply because our current framework prevents us from even receiving them?
Something to ponder as you channel your emotional energy today. Until next time, keep digging into the depths of your own reality.